say there's a big game, big environment. Would you rather be on the call in that game, or would you rather just sit courtside and get to experience the game?
Like, I don't care whether they win or lose. That's up to them. And when you do so many games and study so many teams, you really gain an appreciation, at least I do.
A ton of people talk about this freshman class and just how loaded it is from top to bottom. I want to ask, who are some of your favorite freshmen that you've got to watch this year?
You guys run more miles in a game than we did because there are way more actions in one possession than there used to be. And there's a shot clock now. We had a shot clock. It was 45 seconds.
Welcome to Behind the Grind, a series that looks to uncover the stories behind some of the elite athletes, professionals, and coaches, exploring the mindset and the experiences that shape their success. I am your host, Will Hankey, and today we have a very, very special guest, somebody who has seen the game from just about every angle. Through his years of playing, coaching, and now broadcasting, he's become one of the leading voices and most respected figures in the game of basketball. I would like to give a very warm welcome to the king of college basketball, if you will, Mr. Jay Bilas.
Well, thanks, Will. Thanks for having me.
Yes,
Honored
absolutely.
to be here.
Thank you for being here. Attention, ladies and gentlemen. For a limited time only, Shady Rays is offering you 25% off their Frontier snow goggles. These next-gen products are built perfect for the slopes with quick swap anti-fog lenses and triple layer foam to keep you warm. On top of that, any snow purchase earns you 30% off all sunglasses site-wide. That means you can earn up to 55% off some of the most high-quality sunglasses on the market. Don't hesitate. Visit shadyrays.com today to take advantage of these limited-time steals.
Of course.
7 o'clock game against Duke tonight, so I know you've got a busy schedule. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me.
So you're not a stranger to the Louisville area. I know we spoke a little bit, your connection to your brother here. I want to ask you your favorite golf course to play around the city.
My brother was a member for a long time at Lake Forest Country Club, so I played there a lot. I think my favorite would be Valhalla, but I haven't played a lot of places here other than those two. I haven't played Hurstbourne yet, where my brother's a member now. So I need to get out and play a little bit more. But those two are always fun. The people are great.
Yes, sir. We've got some beautiful golf courses here. So let's say you finish your evening out at Valhalla. Where are you going to dinner in Louisville? What's your favorite dinner spot in the city?
Wherever my brother says we're going. But there are a lot of great places. Ruby's is always great.
Yes, sir.
But there are so many great places here. It's hard to pick one. But I go wherever he wants to eat. He knows how to eat. He does a good job.
Well, he takes care of you then, and he knows the city well. I'd like to start. A big partner of the show is Eric Wood, and I'd like to ask you an Eric would you rather question. With your broadcasting, you've had some experiences calling unbelievable games, and I'd like to ask, say there's a big game, big environment. Would you rather be on the call in that game, or would you rather just sit courtside and get to experience the game?
I'd probably rather be on the call. It's been a long time since I've gone to a game as a fan, and I almost don't remember how to be a fan. And that was kind of an adjustment when I first started in broadcasting. Usually when you go to a game, you have a rooting interest. And I've gone to games for 30 plus years now where I don't care who wins. And that's a different feeling. I'm used to it now. But I think when you're calling a game, you pay more attention to the details of it. So that's more fun for me.
Absolutely. And I guess you've got to keep that in mind when they've got you on call for so many Duke games.
Maybe I guess that would have been an issue 35 years ago, but it's not now. Like, I don't care whether they win or lose. That's up to them. And when you do so many games and study so many teams, you really gain an appreciation, at least I do, for how hard all these teams work and how much they want to win, how much they put into it. And so I'm totally detached from who wins and loses. Every game I go to, somebody wins, somebody loses, and I got to move on to the next game. So I'm not really into that. So whoever wins and loses, that's up to them. It's not up to me.
Yeah, I guess that's the right way to go about it. Just appreciate the game for what it is and remain neutral. So obviously we're here to hear about your story and kind of learn some things from you. But I'd like to start just personally. I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you about college basketball right now. A lot of people talk about how the talent right now is at an all-time high for various reasons. And a ton of people talk about this freshman class and just how loaded it is from top to bottom. I want to ask, who are some of your favorite freshmen that you've got to watch this year?
Well, Michael Brown Jr. is phenomenal. He's right up there. But, watching A.J. DeBonsa at BYU, Darren Peterson at Kansas, Cam Boozer at Duke's been great. Caleb Wilson at North Carolina. There are so many players. I think but the thing to me that sets apart this freshman class, there have been years over my time in the game where, the top of the class has been great. The depth of outstanding freshmen this year is beyond years that I can remember. Maybe there have been other years like this, but I don't remember them. And that's been extraordinary. And it's something I really appreciate seeing. But there are more older players in the game now. Things have evolved and they ebb and flow. So when I played a million years ago, everybody stayed to be seniors. It was really rare that a player left early back then. There wasn't the money in the game that there is now in the NBA. And then we went through the one and done period, which still exists, but not to the extent it did before. And now you've got players that would have gone into the draft early years ago that they can afford to wait now until they're truly ready, both physically, emotionally, whatever, because they can make money while they're in college now. And that, to me, that's been nothing but a good thing. And I realize people my age and older may not like it because they're not used to it. But, I used to ask my friends, like, we all knew people that left, didn't go to college to play minor league baseball. How different is that? Like these players some of them are at genius level in this sport, and they have a certain amount of time that they can take advantage of it. If you had a music student that was on a music scholarship that was, talented like Taylor Swift is, would you say, nope, while you're in school, you're not allowed to make records, you're not allowed to play for money, you're not allowed to have concerts? That would be ludicrous to suggest that. And I think it's similarly ludicrous to suggest that an athlete shouldn't be able to take advantage of his or her capabilities while they're in school.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when people sometimes criticize these young athletes for taking the opportunities to play until they're 25, 26 years old, I think what these fans have to understand is that this is money that not everybody can make at later points in their life, and they have this talent that they can use to make that as a means to make that money and provide a future for themselves and for their families. And
yeah, but whether they can or can't do it later on doesn't really, in my view, factor into whether they should be allowed to do it now. Like, look, this isn't Division III basketball. This is a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry. The players didn't make it into that. The administrators did. And, when I played, there was a lot of money in the game. It doesn't even compare to what it is now. Coaches making millions, these multi-billion-dollar television deals. It's been professional for a long time. And now it's at least becoming professional, and the players are allowed to participate to a level. They're still not paid what their value is, but at least they're allowed to participate to a level. And that, I think what people miss sometimes is older folks like me like to say, well, it's all transactional now. It's always been transactional. Players always had to sign a letter of intent. Do I get a scholarship or not? What do I get when I come to this school? Now it's just better. And every student goes through that. Every student you're in school with, money was an issue. Am I going to get scholarship money? How much does a school cost? How much will it cost my family to get me back and forth? Things like that. How much is tuition? Everybody factors in money. And there's no person in America in business that takes a job and looks at a job that doesn't consider what they're going to get paid. It might not be the only consideration, but it's not the only consideration for every athlete either. But it's now it's a variable that they can factor in.
And with this variable, being such a factor for these young guys and possibly even a motivator to improve their game, and as the game is evolving, how do you compare the current level of the game of college basketball to that of years past?
Every iteration of the game, every generation gets better from the one before. We can sit and debate why that is. Rest and recovery is better, or they spend more time working on their games. They spend more time in the weight room. All that. Nutrition is better. Everything's better. I think there were certain periods where, in maybe 10 years ago or so, where you could argue teams from my era would have been competitive with teams today because we were older. That's fair. But at the same age, like the average, high school senior that comes in, the really good players, the ranked players, are way better than they were when I played. That doesn't mean that Michael Jordan wasn't better than any of these guys. That's not what I'm saying. But overall, the players are better now than they've ever been. So when you hear, and this is part of function, I think, of getting older, people of my generation will say, oh boy, the players are so much better back in the day. We did this, that, and the other. It's not true. It's not true at all. Because you never hear them say, well, I played in the 1980s. You never hear people from my generation saying, well, the players of the 60s were better than the players of the 80s. They would never entertain that thought because it's not true. And similarly, it's not true that the players of today aren't significantly better than the players of yesteryear. That's just the way the world works. You might not know some of these names. Michael Phelps, Michael Phelps is a swimmer. If they never invented the stopwatch, people would say that Mark Spitz in the 1972 Olympics was a faster swimmer. Michael Phelps lapped him in those events. Yeah. I mean, people get better and they get more efficient, and nutrition, all these different things. So the players are better. There's no question.
Along with the evolution of player development, of nutrition and the weight room and all these things that help players become better individually, would you say that the expansion of the creativity in the game, the different ways in which coaches put their guys in positions, the more space that's in the game, the higher levels of pace, do you think that allows for this improvement in skill?
Yes. Well, the game that you play in college basketball is vastly different from the game that I played. So I'll give you an example. For people from my generation that watch today, and they may complain that Sananda Frew is not, he's not guarding ball screens, he's getting in foul trouble, he's doing this, he's not rebounding. You're going, he's got to guard 5 ball screens in one possession. Mm-hmm. We never had to do that. Yeah. Like, I never had to do that. My job was to run down court and try to beat my man down there, meet him at the free throw line and wrestle him for low post position. That was it. Mm-hmm. We never had to get out on the perimeter and guard a ball screen and hedge hard and recover and peel switch and do all these different things you guys are doing. The game's more complicated now. It's more of a full court game. The three-point shot, which came in the year after I graduated, three-point shot came into college basketball in 1987. That's changed everything. Mm-hmm. It's an asymmetrical threat that really caused the game to be played with the entire court. We used to work really hard when I played to get a 12-foot jump shot, because if you shot a 20-footer, that's a lower percentage than a 12-footer. Now a 20-footer or a 22-footer is really a higher percentage shot. So you have offenses that are geared toward getting open threes and rim shots, which lead to free throws, which is still, even with the three-point shot, the free throw line is the most efficient place to score on a basketball floor. So the game's totally different than it used to be. Everything's more complicated. And the thing that I just am amazed at is the conditioning that it takes to be able to play now. You guys run more miles in a game than we did, because there are way more actions in one possession than there used to be. And there's a shot clock now. We had a shot clock. It was 45 seconds. It's a big difference between 45 and 30. I think it should be 24 because basketball is a game of quick decisions. But you're absolutely right. The game's totally different. It bears no resemblance now to what it was then. That doesn't mean that we couldn't have played that game or you couldn't have played the game when we played. That's not what anybody's saying, or at least that's not what I'm saying. But it's way different. And it's like saying that the Green Bay Packers of the 60s could beat the Tom Brady's New England Patriots. They couldn't. They couldn't. And that's as it should be. Like, nobody's arguing that the Cars were better in 1970 or 1980 than they are now. They're not. And everything's better now, and so are basketball players.
Yeah, and it's kind of important to recognize that, while also you can still credit and highlight the players of the past. An example people might use is Shaquille O'Neal and say he would dominate in today's game, where some people might say he wouldn't fit in today's game, when really, yeah, he would have a big advantage on the block. He would be able to do what Shaquille O'Neal does well. But like you highlighted, he never had to guard 5 ball screens in a play. He never had to run the miles that guys run. And there's just so many changes that come with that we as enjoyers of the game have to understand while we watch the game.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction you make, that, you know, name whatever player from yesteryear. No reasonable basketball person is suggesting that the greats of the game wouldn't be just as great in any era. Nobody's saying that. What I'm saying, at least, is generally the players are better now than they've ever been. They're better now than they've ever been. They're more skilled. They shoot it better. Like, all the percentages say so. They shoot it better from the foul line generally. That doesn't mean there weren't 95% free throw shooters back in the day and all that stuff, but not everybody made them like that. It's absurd to suggest otherwise. But, you know, people get into this nostalgia thing, and it's great. Like, we should look back and honor the past. But you'd be kind of foolish to say George Mikan, who was the best big guy of his generation and his time, was as good as Shaquille O'Neal. That's a crazy notion. Mm-hmm. But if you put Shaquille O'Neal, and he grew up that way, like, I played against Ralph Sampson in college. So Ralph Sampson was 7'4", three-time National Player of the Year. Had a really good NBA career, but he was injured after several years of playing the NBA, and never really did what was expected because of injury. But if Ralph Sampson were born 21 years ago, I think he'd be kind of like Victor Wembanyama. And because he would have been raised in the game differently. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have stuck him down in the low post like you did with big guys back in the day. So, you know, everything's changed, and it's largely a great thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just the different ways that the game is being played. There's
fun.
So much to appreciate. So kind of going back to a little bit of the NIL stuff, I want to ask specifically, because we said that it has raised the level of play in college basketball as a whole, but I'd like to ask about how you feel it's affected the gap between low major programs, mid major programs, and high major programs, where in a world where players can move, coaches can move up and take higher salaries, and just the difference in resources between these different levels of programs, how has it affected the gap?
Well, there are two things there. One is the transfer portal, which has changed everything, but the other is sort of NIL and revenue sharing. So I think some people would find it more palatable if they don't like it. Like, I like it. I think it's great that the players are getting paid. I think it's actually great that they have choice. So, you know, if you've got players that are at 2 or 3 different schools, or a player that has gone, like, take Dalton Knecht at Tennessee. Dalton Knecht played at Northern Colorado. He was an under-recruited, unknown player out of high school, and he blossomed at Northern Colorado, and then had the opportunity to go to Tennessee, and he was basically first-team All-America, SEC Player of the Year, whatever the accolades were, and everybody in America who followed basketball knew who he was. Drafted in the first round by the Lakers. We wanted a system where he couldn't leave Northern Colorado, and so he was relegated to that because that's where he was that's where he was considered out of high school. You know, him being able to use the transfer portal and better himself both financially and be on the stage he wanted to be on from the beginning is a good thing. Does it make it difficult for lower mid-major teams that have a great player that gets to move up? Maybe. Of course it does. But they're also getting players that don't do as well from major conference teams that are coming down there. So they have to, you know, certainly have some alacrity and smarts with how they recruit. But think of it this way. You got a mid-major coach that has a great team and a job opens at a major conference level. You don't see them staying. Mm-mm. They're taking it. And why should players be any different? And my thing is, if you want a player to stay, then treat him the right way. Don't lie to him. And then sign him to a multi-year contract. And if you want to put a buyout in there that incentivizes that person to stay, then so be it. But I think it's really hard to listen to some of these coaches who I love, but listen to some of these coaches complain about player loyalty and they don't want to go through adversity and all this nonsense. When Lane Kiffin has a team going to the college football playoff and bolts and leaves his players in the lurch and then takes their assistants with them while they're playing for a championship. Mm-hmm. And then we want to say, well, it's just the calendar. No, it's not. Like, the same loyalty stuff and the same you made a commitment stuff applies to the coaches as to the players. And you don't hear any coaches being vocal about that. Like I didn't hear Tom Izzo or John Calipari come out on that. They didn't say a word about that. And they may feel the same way about it. I'm not trying to disparage them. But when it's a player, you know, everybody jumps out, this is wrong, shame on them and all that. Well, what about the coaches? Mm-hmm. Like, let's be consistent here. Let's not contradict ourselves. And that's one thing that really kind of frosts me. I don't like it when the players are seen as these, you know, mercenary transactional types, and then the coaches, you know, jobs open, they're gone. Mm-hmm. And that would never happen in the NFL or the NBA. They don't allow that, but college allows it. And you've got these presidents who wave their finger at you talking about integrity and values. And when they have an opening, they'll go take a fellow member's coach that's under contract. That's not right. Yeah. And we've been doing it forever, and it's become a way of doing business that we're just somehow used to. And it's the same issue.
Yes, sir. Yeah, kind of disregard the player, disregard the coach. It kind of is like the old quote, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Right.
We're all playing by the same rules. May those rules be somewhat unclear, absolutely, but we're all playing by the same rules, and just you're looking out for yourselves.
Yeah, and you'll hear this too, Will. Like a person of my age will say, "Well, you know, we were loyal back in the day." Were we really?
You had no other option.
We had no other option. If we wanted to transfer, there were fewer places to transfer back then because rosters were more set. But you also had to give up a year of your life. Mm-hmm. And for what? Like that was referred to as a year in residence. And the theory was when you transferred, you needed a year to acclimate yourself to your new school. So a person who had college experience needed to take a year off to acclimate themselves, but freshmen could play right away. They had no college experience coming from high school. And you're like, that makes no sense. Mm-hmm. It's a penalty. That's all it was a penalty that they could control player movement. And it was a disincentive to transfer. And it was also the functional equivalent of a non-compete provision in an employment contract when they're not under contract. You wouldn't tell any other student that they couldn't, you know, the NCAA said athletes are students who just happen to be athletes. They're students to be treated as any other student. No other student is told they can't go to another school that wants to have them, and they can participate in whatever extracurricular activities they want at their new school if their school allows it. And that's all I've ever asked is if you say they're like any other student, then treat them like any other student. They should be allowed to go if they want to go.
Yeah. And having covered kind of the transfer system and how it operates, you mentioned a little bit earlier the system in NIL by which players get paid, and you mentioned maybe you could do a multi-year deal that incentivizes them to stay. With a lot of the money now being paid up front, just how do you feel in general about that system by which they get paid, and how would you change it, if at all? Would you?
Well, I mean, look, if I were king and could do whatever I wanted, which will never happen, never should, what I would say as president of the NCAA is, and the president can't make these decisions, but if you could, what I would say is everybody do what you want to do. Like you're all institutions of higher learning. Most of you have hospitals and all that stuff. You got 30,000 employees. You know how to handle. You know who to pay. Like every coach in America knows who to give a scholarship to, who to give a uniform to, and who to put in the game when they want to win. They know exactly what they're worth, exactly what they're willing to pay. So pay them what you want. And if you don't think a player is good enough, then don't pay him. Like it's not that hard. Mm-hmm. But I would allow, if you want to make them employees, do. If you want to sign them to multi-year deals, do it. But the NCAA now, the reason that it appears to be chaotic is because the NCAA doesn't want the players to become employees. And so they want Congress to come in and give them an antitrust exemption so that they could legally violate federal antitrust law. That's what they're asking for. And that's like, to me, you know, that's like giving a bank robber keys to the vault. I don't think Congress should do that. That's their business, not mine. But if I have an opinion, I don't think they should do that. I think if Congress gets involved, what they should do is exempt athletes from the Fair Labor Standards Act and the National Labor Relations Act and give them a mechanism where they can collectively bargain with the NCAA and or the conferences, and they can come up with a framework together that's workable for the business and for the players. And if the players agree to a structure through collective bargaining, it'd be just like a salary cap in the NBA or the NFL. It's really not that difficult conceptually. But if Congress wants to do that, that's great. But I can't imagine a situation where in America we tell the revenue driving segment of the business, you get only this. And then coaches, you get whatever you want. Whatever you can negotiate, you get. Administrators, you get whatever you can negotiate. That doesn't sit right with me.
Yes, sir. That makes a lot of sense. That's an insightful perspective.
I'm old. When you're old, you have insights.
Do you think there's like kind of an issue with like accountability, like giving a 19-year-old $800,000, and if he's upset a month into the season, he can leave and he's going to keep all the money? Do you think like we could do anything about the accountability of?
Sure, and that's what contracts would be about.
Yeah, because like NBA, you get paid every 2 weeks. You know, this is, and it's kind of like where the NCAA introduced NIL with just zero system, and like it's going to get fixed. They're going to introduce things most likely but they just kind of jumping into it and just saying we're going to give them all this money, and we have really like there's like you said all the acts like just being employees. And that's what these athletes are, but they're not being paid like employees. They're being just given a bunch of money. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Nobody's like, at least I'm not arguing the system's perfect. It's not, but it's certainly better than it used to be when you were allowed nothing. You know, it's kind of like the old line from Caddyshack, you'll get nothing and like it.
Yeah.
And that's what we were told. You know, you're lucky to have what you have, keep your mouth shut and play. Yeah. And it's never been amateur. It's always been a professional enterprise where everybody got paid, you know, except for the athletes. So, you know, are there things that we can improve upon? Absolutely. But it's still new. Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be a period, and we're in it right now, of having to figure everything out. Like this was forced on the NCAA. They lost court cases. You know, they wanted to continue to go on and do this with impunity forever. Mm-hmm. And that ended for them. They didn't see this coming. They should have, but they didn't. They didn't plan for it. And so there have been some painful moments for institutions, but you know what? Every game's played on time. All the checks are clearing. Ratings have never been higher. So everything that they told us about, oh, you start paying the players, you know, people aren't going to watch anymore. You know, amateurs, it was a lie. Mm-hmm. I knew it was a lie, but now it's been proven as such.
Kind of going to your playing career now, having the opportunity to play 4 seasons, be a starter for your 4-year career under Coach Krzyzewski. Could you tell me maybe your favorite thing about playing under Coach K?
It was great. You know, I grew up in Los Angeles and never really contemplated leaving home to play. And so when I started getting recruited and started looking beyond sort of my area, I came down to coaches that I wanted to play for. It had very little, this probably wasn't the right way to look at it, but it had very little to do with the school. It had to do with the coach. I figured the coach I wanted to play for would be at a school I wanted to go to. So I came down to 4 coaches. I came down to Coach K at Duke, who was the least well-known of the coaches that were recruiting me. And then I came down to Lute Olson, who was at Iowa at that time. This is before he went to Arizona. And then Jim Boeheim at Syracuse and Ted Owens at Kansas. Those were the 4 coaches that I felt like I wanted to play for. And I think I would have been really happy with any of the 4. But there was something about Coach K that I just really appreciated. And I just knew like he was right for me. And I loved it. Didn't mean there weren't hard times throughout it, but I loved it. And especially playing for him back then when he was younger. He was probably 35 when I was 18. And so I got him young. And the great part about that was, you know, he stayed at Duke for 42 years, whatever it was. And so really through my whole adult life until I became a 59-year-old man, he was still at the school I played for. Mm-hmm. So that was a really cool thing. Kept me more connected to the university and to the program and to him. And so to have him as a coach, mentor, and friend for 40 plus years, even up to today, you know, extraordinarily lucky. But I played with some great guys. And the fact that we were unique, that because like our freshman class was the #1 recruiting class in the country, we were ranked #1 recruiting class. And because the program wasn't in great shape when we got there, we all started as freshmen. So we had the same team for 4 straight years. There real positives to that. And there are some things that are difficult too. So you're in the same role for 4 straight years. It wasn't like, the seniors were going to leave and then you were going to bump up your role. That didn't happen for us. We were the exact same role for 4 years, but it was great. There's give and take and everything. And I wouldn't trade that experience for any I've ever had.
Yeah, and I'd imagine the relationships you're able to build with those guys, have just playing so many games with them, building that sweat equity and spending all that time together is really unique and honestly something you don't see very much anymore, guys staying together for that long.
Yeah, it was different, but even the guys that were seniors, so that you only played with them for a year, or guys that came in after that maybe were a freshman when I was a senior, we're still the same level of close and together. I've got more time with guys like Johnny Dawkins and Tommy Amaker and Mark Allery and David Henderson, that crew. But Danny Ferry and Quinn Snyder and all these guys, we're still incredibly tight, and that's something that I haven't really experienced in many other endeavors than sports. I've got really close colleagues from my time as a lawyer. And my time in law school or things like that, but nothing has duplicated sort of the feeling of closeness that you have with teammates on a team.
Yes, sir. I'm sure a lot of athletes can relate to just that unbreakable bond that you build through those experiences. So I want to ask you, we're in the city of Louisville, but aside from the '86 national championship, what is the biggest game that you ever played in college?
Wow. Well, there were NCAA tournament games that led up to that were big, but probably the most memorable games were the ones against North Carolina. That was similar to Louisville, Kentucky rivalry. There was a lot on that, and because the teams were so good, you felt honored to be in the game, to play in those games. Playing against guys like Michael Jordan and Sam Perkins and Kenny Smith and Brad Daugherty, all these guys were lottery picks, and there was just something different about it that you can't really describe. And similar to when you guys play Kentucky, the air in the arena is different, and it's a really cool thing. And we knew it at the time was the good part. You kind of knew you were involved in something special, and then looking back on it, it's still a special thing.
You mentioned you highlighted some players that you were able to play against, some really great players. Could you maybe remember a guy that was the toughest person you ever had to guard in a game?
Oh, yeah. Brad Daugherty, Ralph Sampson would be top of the list. Len Bias. Mm-hmm. Brad Daugherty was a nightmare to guard because he was just so big and strong and skilled and tough. Horace Grant was a great player. But the toughest player I ever played against was when I played pro basketball in Europe, a guy named John Ebeling. I played in Italy for a couple years, and he was a All-American at Florida Southern, I think it was Division II. But he wasn't the best player I ever played against, but he was the toughest because he was relentless. He did everything I could do, but he never quit doing it. Mm-hmm. And it was a great object lesson, kind of like, wait a minute, he's not better than me. He's just tougher than me. And so it caused me to sort of re-examine the way I played. Because I was thinking that, because he was one of those guys you played against him and you're like, I don't want to play against him again. Mm-hmm. And I was like, does anybody ever think that about me? And they probably don't. That was a great lesson.
Yeah, just a guy that's absolutely relentless. And like you said earlier, in a game where you're getting down the court to battle for low post position, that's not the type of guy you want to be matched up against.
Yeah, but it was everything. Like it was, he set screens hard every time. And, every time the shot went up, he hit you, stuff that I could do, mm-hmm. but he just did it over and over and over again. There's no end to it. And, relentless is really hard to beat. And I still don't know whether that's a learned behavior. I think it probably is, but some are more capable of it than others, and he was capable of it.
Yeah, that stuff will wear you down. So, after your college career, obviously you played professionally overseas in Italy and Spain. You were also drafted by the Dallas Mavericks. So, having a solid professional career for just a short time, though, I want to ask you, what made you make the decision to come back to Duke and be an assistant coach under Coach K and also attend law school?
Yeah, it was interesting. So I had an interesting sort of career. I was a really well-regarded high school player. So I was a star high school player, a top 40 recruit, all that stuff. And then I got to Duke, and I was a role player, and a good player, but I was a role player. And then when I was drafted by the Mavericks, I was in camp, and it was pretty clear that my shot of making the roster was after going through camp, wasn't great. I think I could have made an NBA team at that time, but I could make more money going to Italy, and so I took it. I figured if I'm going to be a pro, I'm supposed to make money, and so I figured that's my level, and so I was a star caliber player in Italy, and at that time, Italy was the best place to play other than the NBA in the world, and so it was really fun to kind of be a star caliber player again. But after I'd done it for a couple of years, I wanted to go to law school at some point, and my dad had said, "Look, you need to prepare yourself for going, so you need to take the LSAT and try to get admitted somewhere, so that if you get hurt or you quit playing, whatever happens, if it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever, you're prepared to go. Because if you have to do all that stuff and then go, you're not going to do it at age 30 or 32, whatever he was thinking. And so I took the LSAT and I applied to law school. It was during my third year, I was in Spain, and when I applied to law school, Coach K found out about it, and he called me and said, if you get admitted to law school, will you go? And I told him I was planning on playing longer. And he said, well, I want you on my staff and as an assistant, and then you can go to law school at the same time. So after talking to him about it, I figured, I should probably take this. And one of the reasons I did was wasn't necessarily to start the next thing. It was I'd kind of proven to myself what I wanted to as a player. Like being a star again for a while was fun, but I didn't need to do it for 10 or 12 years. And I wanted to, but I thought this is a pretty good opportunity. And I really thought I would get into coaching and stay there. That didn't wind up happening because, I got married, and we thought it was a more stable life for me to be a lawyer rather than a coach, where we'd have to move every 5 years if I did well. We'd have to move more often if I didn't. But I just sort of put coaching in the rearview mirror and then went to law.
Mm-hmm. And so during your stint back at Duke as a coach, you won 2 national championships in your 3 years while going through law school. How was that time, just in terms of how busy you were?
I was busy, but not overwhelmed. I just kind of cut my life down to basketball, law school, and then the occasional social thing. But there were really only 2 places I was during those 3 years. I was either in the gym or my office or at law school. And it wasn't like I couldn't have any other fun, but it was way more challenging than being a player. But I really enjoyed it. It was like a great education. It was a great basketball education because it was way more detailed than being a player, and of course the law education I got was second to none. So I was really lucky to do it that way. It was really efficient. But I thought I loved basketball so much, and still do, that I thought that's what I want to do. And but I wanted my wife to be happy more than I wanted to coach, so I chose a different path.
Did that time kind of shift your perspective at all about how you saw the game, going from being a player to then coaching under a very legendary coach while going through law school? Did that change your perspective on the game?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I learned more about the game coaching than I did playing, because your playing career, you have assignments, and you're worried about your assignments, not necessarily how the entire thing fits together. And I didn't know how much there was behind every scouting report we got, because the scouting report we got was here's the things you need to do, we need to do, and it was concise. Like Coach K didn't believe and still doesn't believe in overloading the players with too much information. He didn't want us thinking; he wanted us reacting. And so we didn't have like these thick scouting reports that some teams do. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong. So when I got behind the curtain, became an assistant, I was like, holy cow, the detail that we're into is way more than I thought. And so that was an education in and of itself. And I really enjoyed that, and I learned a lot. But I think the basketball education I've received as a broadcaster really kind of took that to the next level because, whether it's you or me, whoever, you're taught the game a certain way, and Coach K had a certain way of doing things, but it's not the only way. His way isn't the only way. And, I saw from other coaches letting me behind their curtain in scouting and their meetings and stuff that they would let me into that, man, I kind of like the way they do this. I like the way this team rebounds. I like the way this team presses or out of bounds stuff. And so if I ever were to get back into it, I would certainly take the foundation I got from Coach K, but I would also take some other stuff. And I guess that's true of a lot of people in basketball.
Yeah. What is something, now that you're an announcer, a broadcaster, something specific that you appreciate about the game that you didn't appreciate as much as a player, as a coach?
Oh, everything, like the different styles, the different ways of communication. The beauty of being a broadcaster is I get to go and, watch your practices or sit in on your scouting reports or whatever it is, and I get to appreciate it. I don't have to, I don't watch your team thinking about how would I stop what you do? How would I deal with a screen for the screener action or stuff like that? I don't have to do that. I just have to appreciate it and be able to point it out from time to time. I don't want to make, at least I try not to make the broadcasts I work on into some basketball clinic because people aren't watching it that way. Coaches might be, but and former players, but not the overwhelming majority of people. If you can help them understand something so it benefits, it makes their viewing experience better, great. If you can educate them on something that this team is doing, they might not otherwise see, great. And but you don't want to turn it into a basketball clinic too. But I've learned a ton, and I'm really grateful to all the coaches and players that are so forthcoming. Like, hey, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we do, and how we do it. I've learned a lot that way.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, kind of bridging the gap where you have to understand the details and all the little things that are occurring within the game, but relaying that to all the viewers of the game in a way that is entertaining and makes sense and is almost educational about the game. You're shining light on the beauty of the game.
Yeah, you try to, but there are certain times where you got to let things go. Like you're not going to beat people to death with all this like intricate detail of something. But if there's something like, hey, look, they're running this action so they can get a switch and this player can have a matchup and take this on, and then people are looking for it. And if it helps them a little bit, I always remember when I was a big baseball fan and I was watching back then when it said game of the week, that was literal. It was one national baseball game on a week. And Vin Scully and Joe Garagiola are doing the game. And Joe Garagiola was a catcher in Major League Baseball. And then he became a broadcaster. And he called a pitch out before it happened. And pitcher's about to get into his windup. He goes, pitch out. And they throw a pitch out and get the runner. And Vin Scully was like, how did you know that? And he said, well, he gave the fist. That's kind of the universal sign for a pitch out. And he saw it on the camera and said that. And that was the kind of thing you're going, okay, that helped the viewer understand it and illuminated something for him. But you don't want to do that on every pitch. You're not trying to call. There are certain times where things are, you may know or think hey, here's something that's going to happen. Late game situations, an out of bounds play, and you go, hey, watch this guy, watch this player when he sets the screen. He's going to slip here. And then the guy does it, slips, and gets a layup. That's great. Doesn't always happen, but you don't want to do that on every play. But sometimes you can do that, and it's helpful. But you don't want to make it about, like, hey, look at me. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
That's you try to avoid that.
Yeah, you go about it with a certain sense of humility where it's not about you.
It's not
exactly about the game.
It's about the game. And you try to make the game entertaining. Like, to me, I worked for a lot of years with Bill Raftery, and Raftery is the best there's ever been in this. And he knows exactly when to have fun and when the game's really important and it comes down to the end or whatever, really important stuff. He's locked into the important stuff. Like he balances it as well as anybody's ever done it. And so you try to use that as a template and do it your way. I could never be as good as Bill, but you just try to do it that way. And like some people are gonna. What my favorite thing about this, and I have a great sense of humor about this, is, especially with social media, you can see that I don't look at it anymore because it's toxic. But you know, sometimes the comments like on Twitter or something, half will think you're in the bag for one team and half will think you're in the bag for the other. And they'll think you're biased for one team or another. And usually it's the team that loses thinks you talk too much about the other team. Okay, that's fine. But, you know, you said, well, you don't like our team. You know, you're biased. And I said, so wait a minute, it's my mouth that's biased, but not your ears. Like, you know, you're biased toward your team.
Yeah.
And I first started out doing Duke radio. And I found out pretty quickly, like, I was really interested in the other team that Duke played. And I thought kind of initially that, okay, well, I'll help educate the Duke fans on the team that Duke's playing. You know, they probably don't know anything about this team. They don't know Iowa, and they press or they do this or whatever, great offensive rebounding team. So you talk about what they do, and Duke fans didn't like it. They want to hear about their team. And even if they've heard it 100 times, they want to hear it 101. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing a game like for local, well, you know, you're a broadcaster for a team, then it's a little bit different. When you're doing it national, then, you know, that's out the window.
Yeah, and there's definitely a different mindset that you have to carry when you're calling for the local broadcast as opposed to the entire country.
It's the difference in audience.
Yeah. You've been on the call for some unbelievable games, of course, very memorable ones. Can you call back on one that you'd say is your favorite game or the most memorable one?
Probably not. I mean, there are so many memorable ones. You know, I've been doing this for 30 plus years. So, like, you know, people would always ask about the Syracuse-UConn 6 overtime game, which was a very average game until the overtime started, and then it became a thing. It did a 3 overtime game in the Maui Invitational between Gonzaga and Michigan State that was awesome. Maybe the best game was when ESPN used to trade me over to CBS for the tournament, and I did an Elite Eight game between Arizona in 2005, Arizona and Illinois. And Illinois wound up going, they won. They wound up going to the national championship game, but they were down and looked like they were out. And they came back and won the game in overtime, and it was a magnificent game. I don't think I'll ever do a game better than that one, but I hope I do, but I may not. But every game is unique and fun. And, you know, the only thing I ever hope for in a game is that it's close and competitive, because those are the really fun games. I don't know any fan, even if they want to see their team win, like, you know, Louisville against Duke. Louisville wants to see their team win. The game's way better if they win in overtime versus win by 30, you know. And maybe some fans would disagree with that, but I just love the roller coaster ride of a game that comes down to the end and it's really well played the whole way through.
Absolutely. Excuse me. And like you mentioned, just having so many experience calling hundreds of games, who is somebody who is your favorite person to sit next to and call a game with?
I don't have a favorite. I've been really lucky to work with some amazing pros. You know, I've called NBA games with Mike Breen. I work with Dan Schulman now and have for many years now. And there's just not a better pro or better human being than Dan. Dan is what you would want in a broadcaster or a person. He's unbelievably skilled and talented, but nothing is ever about him. If you try and like, he's got an ego like everybody else. He wants to do well, and has his own ambitions, of course, but because we all do. But he would never be the one where he wanted a spotlight to be on him. Sean McDonough is brilliant. Like, nobody calls the big moments or tells stories and weaves stories in a game better than Sean does. Mike Tirico. I mean, it's ridiculous. I worked with Dick Enberg for a number of years. He passed away, but you know, he was an idol of mine growing up. You know, he did UCLA games when I was a kid, and then I got the privilege of working with him for several years. But there've been so many guys like Reese Davis and doing game day, and I do games with Reese too. He's the best teammate I've ever had in anything. Just a magnificent pro and the best at what he does, and the best teammate you could ever ask for.
Yeah, Had the pleasure to work with a lot of great people, and I'm sure
Lucky.
every single one of them would have a bunch of great things to say about you.
I
as
doubt
well.
that, but don't ask them. I don't want to hear the negative stuff.
Well, maybe we'll be lucky enough to get them on here sometime. One thing I've noticed, just kind of following your career, aside from the broadcasting, the coaching, the playing, everything, you consistently highlight student managers in the college game, and I just kind of want to know why you do that. What about these managers do you love so much?
I love managers. I'm guessing you would agree with this, that I don't think anybody works harder than managers.
No.
They're there before practice. They're there after. They take care of everything. They never ask for anything. And when I first learned about managers playing games against one another, I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I used to go to some of them. I can't always do that. But I just loved it. And then when I would find out, you get to know some of the managers at different places, and they say, "Hey, we got a game tonight. Can you go?" And I go, "Well, I can't come tonight, but send me like a scouting report of your team." And I started putting stuff out, and they got a bang out of it, but I loved it. And then there's a great guy at Michigan State named Kevin Pauga who put together analytics for manager games and rankings, and then they have their own national championship. I mean, it's just kind of cool that the ones that do so much of the work behind the scenes, if you throw a little bit their way, because they're great. And I always tell friends of mine, like, man, you want a good employee, hire a basketball manager. Like, you're never going to get more loyal, hardworking, and they're all unbelievably smart people. So I respect managers a lot.
Yeah. I actually have on my phone one of those Twitter threads that you mentioned. I've got the 2016 Florida State versus Louisville matchup between the managers, and you put out a thread of a complete scouting report, and I was hoping you could read that out for us.
Sure.
You gave some pretty in-depth analysis. You know these guys back and forth. Pretty good stuff.
Louisville managers taking on Florida State managers tonight in a late-night tilt in the 5:02. Scouting reports to follow. U of L manager Patrick Sherrard, after missing every shot, still takes game winner, yelling, "You like that?" as he leaves the gym and trips. U of L manager Justin Moody played, in quotation marks, NAIA basketball, once caught shaking his head at Pitino's game plan, no longer travels.
That's good.
U of L manager Mike Brooks, quick first step when setting up chairs during timeouts, painfully slow when something needs to be cleaned up. It's just stuff that we would joke about with the managers, and they got a kick out of it.
So I don't know if you know, but you're actually in the territory of the reigning national championship managers.
Yeah.
Coming off the national championship. And you said how I can attest to these managers, man. They just are unbelievable workers, like countless hours. And they just, like you said, they don't ask for anything. They don't complain. They're all about the team. And it really shows a lot about their character, the type of person that it takes to take that job and to do it with so much pride.
And I always used to like, when I'd go to practice, I might be there early and the managers are doing something. I'd try to get together with them, and I go, "All right, biggest screw up so far this year." And they go, "Oh, we forgot so-and-so's shoes," or whatever. This happened. And they laugh about it and give each other a hard time. It's just it's a community of hardworking pros, really, that they work in the shadows, but they're a huge part of your success.
Oh yeah.
And they never ask for anything, and when they get something, they're grateful for it. It's a great community of people.
You just can't understate how great they are and how important they are to all these programs. So I want to shout out. We've got 7 managers in our, on our staff, which honestly is pretty impressive. A lot of programs will have more, so those guys are working even harder. So Ian, Josh, Matt, Sam, Tatum, Tobias, and Pat, I thank you guys so much. Like, we would not be able to function as a program, and you guys know that, but I want you to hear that, how important you guys are to everybody in this program, and I thank you guys so much. So next time you're in town, I want you to come. I
would love to do
hope you
that.
can come down to South Floyd Street, because they've got some really high-level managers and some pretty good GA play for sure. But it's a fun group.
The GAs make a difference. I watched a Maryland-Ohio State manager game, and Greg Oden played for the Ohio State manager team, and then Juan Dixon played for the Maryland team. I'm like, this is a different level. This is pretty good.
Yeah, 4 of our 5 starters are former college players, so we've built a pretty good squad with the graduate assistants. I'd like to ask you a little bit about a Louisville legend. You know, we touched on you being pretty familiar with the Louisville area, and I talked with you prior to recording. You had a pretty good relationship with Junior Bridgman, a legend around this area. I mean, you can't understate the impact that he had on this community. He was such a selfless man, and he changed so many lives. Like, that was a guy who embodied excellence. He embodied humility more than anybody, and I was lucky enough to get to know him through my dad, Troy Hankey. Had a good relationship with him. So I just want to ask you, through your relationship with Junior, what kind of impact did he have on you?
The same as with you. He was an example of how you treat people, and just a humble superstar. And he would recoil if you called him that. He'd take the humble part, but not the superstar part. But that's what he was and remains in not only the Louisville community, but the overall basketball community. And built an empire in business. But you wouldn't know whether he was, in talking to him, whether he was the CEO or the head of the janitorial staff. That was the type of person that he was, and treated everybody the same, incredibly respectfully. And to me, like, Junior Bridgman was what every athlete, every person should strive to be. Like, he did his best all the time. And when he went into business and started with the Wendy's franchise, he worked in there.
Mm-hmm, yeah, he flipped burgers.
Yeah, I remember hearing a story about him working the window or something, and maybe somebody left the window thinking, "Oh, how sad." He's working at a Wendy's. Like, no,
yeah, I think
he owns the place.
I think that was on the news. They said, "Man, Junior Bridgman. It's tough to see what happens to these athletes post playing career."
Right, he owns the place.
He owns them,
and he wanted to know. Like, he had the humility to say, "I want to know every inch of how this business works." And it's a great example for anyone of how to do things. And I was lucky to be around him, not maybe as much as you or as some, but I'm really grateful for being able to have known him.
And it's really such a beautiful thing, unfortunately, with his passing occurring earlier this year, but all the stories that have come out about Junior and what people have been able to take from just who he was as a person. And like you said, as successful as he was and as incredible of a life that he lived, the legacy he left behind, I think the most notable thing about him was how he treated people.
Yeah. And people, like, someone your age who was around him, that rubs off on you. You notice it. And that's one of the reasons that programs like Louisville or Duke or Indiana, whatever, name all the great programs, having former players come back and spend time with the current players. I'm sure when I was in college, I didn't appreciate as much as I should have at the time the influence of guys like Dick Grote, who was a former Duke player, played Major League Baseball. He was MVP of the National League in 1960. And I knew Dick really well. But all the guys that came back, they had a great influence on us, even if we didn't really appreciate it like we should have at the time. All this stuff is cumulative, and as you get older, you kind of remember these things, and it helps shape you. And I can't imagine the profound impact that Junior had on so many Louisville players over the years, and not just Louisville players, but everybody.
No, he was a guy I can remember just as a kid growing up. My dad would have connections to these people, and anytime I'd ask, "How do you know so and so?" He's like, he wanted to talk to Junior or whoever. Any NBA player, like Louisville players, so many people, it seems like if it's a successful athlete, he or she has probably been mentored by or has some sort of relationship with Junior Bridgman.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show what an amazing man he was.
Amazing human being.
Yes, sir. So usually before we wrap things up, we do a Dash Clip Phone a Friend segment. Dash Clip is a lifestyle wallet company that produces affordable and really durable products. Unfortunately, we're running short on time today, and like I mentioned, we've got the Duke game this evening, so we're gonna give your phone a break. We won't
It's
make
too bad. I was going to call Beyonce.
I will. You can call her later. You can call her later this evening. It's no big deal. So one more question before we're done. Going back to college basketball, just looking at it as a whole, what gives you a lot of hope about where the future of the sport is headed as the game just continues to evolve?
The game is bigger than all of these issues we like to think are so important. It's bigger. And it doesn't matter whether it's your time as a player, my time as a player. We got into basketball because we loved it. And that's all that ever motivated me. I used to recoil when people would say, you're amateur, so you're playing for the love of the game. Like, well, I loved it more when I got paid. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I never bought any of that stuff, but it was the way it was, so I had to deal with it. But one of the things that frosts me a little bit about the way things are painted now when people say, oh, it's transactional, is like the players that I deal with are really smart and they really want to do well. Most of them are doing the right thing with their money and they want to learn. All of this stuff is a good thing. And, does it mean that we have to be more intentional about helping educate, here's how you deal with this money. Here's the right thing to do with it. Think about this or all that. There are amazing resources on these campuses, and whether they're professors in the business school or law school or whatever. And I've never been around people like that say no if they're asked for help. And so you have all these resources. The leg up that you get now, being able to capitalize on your value, I think is nothing but a good thing. When I graduated college, I had no idea what to do with my money when I started making it playing professional basketball. Now you guys are not only financially literate, you're savvy when you get out. And, I never had to pay taxes and stuff like that. We weren't allowed to have jobs. So it's all a good thing. And to get back to your main question, what makes me hopeful about the game are the players. I have so much respect for the job you guys do, because it's really no different than my years. It's no different. You go to practice every day because you want to get better. You want to win. You want to win a championship. You want to be a good teammate and enjoy your teammates and do the right thing. People act like there were never problem players back when I played. It was exactly the same. There's no difference. But you have to deal with more than we did. Like, we had to deal with newspapers and a little bit of talk radio. You guys have more coverage now. Every game's on television. You have all this social media. There's more coming at you that you have to process. And so it's a lot more difficult to be a player now than it was when I played. So I have a ton of respect for the job you guys do.
Yeah, and it really is you got to give a lot of respect to these players, because it's kind of tough to understand. Even myself, I'm not the one getting a bunch of mean DMs and messages, but just seeing how my teammates and the people around me, how they handle this type of adversity as 19, 20, 20, whatever they're young players that have to handle these types of things, and they have to do it with, they have to do it professionally, because they're getting paid, and that's the kind of the standard that they're being held to. Whether that may not be fair, but they do it in a really good way, and I think you got to give a lot of respect to those players.
Yeah, and I don't want to it's the fans' province to complain and say what they think. Like, they love you, they don't love you, whatever. They're unhappy with this or happy with that. That's fine. There's certain lines that can't be crossed, that get crossed more now than ever, and there needs to be accountability for that. You're not allowed to say what you want to, everything you want to say, and I understand that. But it's the same as anything else. Like, look, you go to a restaurant and you don't like the meal, nobody comes out and says, "You're not a chef. How dare you?" Well, nobody's going to listen to that. I mean, I know I'm not a chef, but I know what I like and what I don't like, and this wasn't as good as it was last week. Mm-hmm. I'm allowed to say that. And so somebody watching the game says, "You know what, Louisville didn't guard like they should have," and I'm mad about it. Okay, that's fine. But when you really get right down to it, when you think about it, I have a ton of respect for competitors that are in the arena, And it doesn't mean that they're not subject to criticism and praise and all that. And I think it takes a while to learn how to accept those things the same way, that none of them mean anything, or they don't mean as much as you put onto it. But I'm very, very enthusiastic about where the game is and where it's headed. I think it just continues to get better.
Absolutely. Well, Jay, thank you so much for joining me today. I mean, really, this is like a dream come true for me to be able to sit down and just talk ball with you.
You got to elevate your dreams. There are better dreams out there than this. But thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you very much. And I'll see you later tonight. Hopefully the Cards get it done. They'll know by the time this comes out. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. Be on the lookout for the upcoming Shady Rays Hints of the Week. Tune in and comment down below who you think our next guest feature will be. But for now, Jay, thank you so much for joining me. This has been Will Hankey, and I'll see you guys next week on Behind the Grind. Keep on grinding.